Good afternoon, everyone. We will start today with remarks from the BC Liberal candidate for Richmond-Queensborough, Jas Johal, and then go to a few questions on the line. Thank you for being here. Jas, go ahead.
Thank you, Carly, and thank you for those listening from various newsrooms. I have a few brief comments, and at which point I will take some questions if needed. I have been going through the NDP platform this morning, and what I can tell you is that I am skeptical this platform was put together in the past 2 weeks. It shows the NDP has held back help for those who really needed it. They're using the public's own money to bribe them during an unnecessary pandemic election. We would be in the legislature right now working with the NDP and the Greens to get help to British Columbians, but instead here we are in the midst of an unnecessary election. I've gone through some of the details of the specific policies, and I just want to go through some of them. The NDP are promising $500 per person or $1,000 per household cash deposit. Now, we have to assume this is, first of all, taxable, just like CERB is. My question on that rebate of $500 or $1,000, why was this not done in March? I was there in the legislature with 12 other MLAs, and we agreed upon a $5 billion emergency COVID fund. That money was sitting there since March. It could have been prioritized and out the door helping British Columbians when they need it. Instead, the Premier of this province, under his leadership, Mr. Horgan, has kept that money until now to use the dollars, the public's dollars, to bribe them during an unnecessary pandemic election. I will remind everybody once again, this money was agreed upon in March, and the provincial government held on to it till today's announcement. That is unconscionable. What kind of person holds on to money that could help British Columbians? That is not fair. That is not right. That is unconscionable, and it's just plain wrong. It's a naked attempt to bribe BC taxpayers with their own money. I think it says something about Mr. Horgan as well. He should not have held that money back when British Columbians fundamentally needed it. I also want to remind British Columbians as well, the NDP broke their promise on a renter's rebate in the last election. Now they expect voters to trust them again. They've announced this today, even though 3 years later, rents have gone up by $2,064 on average in Metro Vancouver, and the vacancy rate hasn't budged. I also want to remind British Columbians of what isn't in this platform. The Second Surrey Hospital is not in the platform. The Richmond Acute Care Tower is not in the platform. The elimination of Surrey Portables is not in the platform. The UBC Broadway extension is not in the platform. And let me remind every British Columbians, but particularly those living in Metro Vancouver, there is no plan to replace the Massey Tunnel at this particular point, the largest parking lot probably in British Columbia. I also want to remind British Columbians in this NDP platform that was announced today, the tourism industry is on its knees. It is asking for $680 million in relief. Just think about that for a second. Those are hoteliers, those are small businesses renting out bicycles to whale-watching tours. COVID has impacted this industry, a clean industry that has its impact in Metro Vancouver, to Castlegar, to Cranbrook, to Dawson Creek, to Terrace. Tourism impacts this entire province. They're asking for relief of $680 million. The NDP so far has promised a paltry $50 million and then agreed to set up a task force, and they may hand out another $50 million after that. That's a huge impact on the tourism industry, and that'll impact many small businesses and many people as well, just still struggling to pay their rent. I want to contrast that with the BC Liberal plan, where you get immediate help right away. We are promising a PST cut. That impacts every British Columbian. It impacts small business as well. Under us, the relief is immediate, and it ends up in the wallets of small business and for British Columbians as well. There is absolutely no plan here to grow the economy, which shocks me. We need, not only is this COVID a health crisis, but it's an economic crisis as well. Already, the Business Council of British Columbia has said that 10 to 20,000 small businesses may go under by the end of 2021. We need a plan to grow our economy. That is not in the platform. And you can see already that there will be serious repercussions just in regards to that particular issue for many, many months and years to come. I'm open to any questions from the gallery.
Great, sounds good. We've got a few questions on the line here. We'll start with Richard Zassman from Global News. Go ahead, Richard.
Jas, can you speak to whether you've heard from any of people in your community or those you've been talking to about, how this $1,000 would have helped them if it had come before an election campaign?
Well, when you get together, one of the things everybody talks about in the legislature in the last 6 months is how well the political parties have worked together. We put partisan politics aside. And in good faith, we arrived at that legislature knowing full well British Columbians needed help immediately. That $1,000 can go towards paying rent. That $1,000 can go pay for groceries. When people are down, they need the help immediately. We came in good faith on that day and approved $5 billion in spending immediately. And as I've said, it could have been prioritized and sent out to British Columbians immediately. But it's unconscionable that a government holds on to that money and saves it for an unnecessary pandemic election. You have to wonder how far back was Mr. Horgan and his backroom boys planning this election, knowing full well that October we'd be here, knowing full well that if they hand on those dollars, what they're doing essentially is taking the tax dollars when people needed help and using it as a slush fund for their own interest, in this case, getting re-elected. It's highly, highly offensive. People expect better. And look, at the end of the day, the Greens have worked closely with that government. We have worked closely with this government. We have been applauded collectively of working together. And instead, he rips up that CASA agreement. He throws it all aside for his own personal needs. And that's why it's highly offensive. The $1,000 for a family, $500 for an individual, that money was sitting there in March, when people needed help. I mean, this is a once-in-a-century pandemic, and what does he do? Crass politics. That's what's so offensive about it, Richard.
Do you have a follow-up, Richard?
I'm confused about when you say the money was sitting there. I know the legislature approved $5 billion. It's hard to figure out where the $1.4 billion would fit into that on the other measures that we've seen. Like, do you suggest that this should have replaced some of the other money that was spent, or do you think the legislature should have considered the additional $1.4 billion and had a debate in the legislature in March around additional funding?
What I'm saying is, look, I understand the federal government aggressively dealt with the after effects of COVID on the health side and on the economic side. But the provincial government has a role in this. I just cannot believe, I cannot fathom that there wasn't a need 3 or 4 or 5 months ago. That's what I'm saying. We in good faith agreed that we need to move quickly, which we did. And the government should have moved quickly as well, and they didn't. To hold that money back and then to announce it now in the midst of an election is offensive. There was plenty of need before. You think that money couldn't have gone to the tourism sector? That couldn't go help to a person renting out bicycles at Stanley Park, or a whale-watching tour in Victoria, or a myriad of other tourism sector jobs that are being impacted? They could have moved a lot faster. It just makes people cynical when you hold that money and now announce it in the midst of an election. It's just plain wrong.
Great, thank you. Next question's from Binder Sajan from CTV. Go ahead, Binder.
Hi, Jas, can you hear me? Hello? I'm not sure if you can hear me, Jas. So just on this $1,000 recovery grant, has there been any talk from the parties? You say that there was collaboration on this economic recovery plan and the $5 billion plan. Was there any talk from the parties or amongst the parties to put forward something like this?
You may recall during that emergency debate, it was a one-day debate. We were in the midst of the early days of the pandemic. We weren't sure where things were headed, but this is a very serious time. 12 of us collectively met, socially distant, and the government was given wide berth to deal with this issue. We just wanted to make sure the money was approved. In this case, $36 billion of that was the regular budget, which we approved for the rest of the year, and a special $5 billion emergency fund. We didn't get into the specifics of this particular program deserves this money or that particular program deserves that money. The repercussions of COVID were already being felt, and in the weeks and months ahead, we have seen some of that. In between all of that time, that money could have been out the door much faster. So we gave the government a $5 billion emergency fund to use it as they saw fit in regards to the needs that were out there from the people of British Columbia. But to hold on to it and then announce it now in October, a few weeks away from voting day, is what's offensive. They could have used that money in any place that they want to, but much earlier. What I'm saying is, I'm highly skeptical that they hold on to those dollars and then announce it just weeks from Election Day. That's not what I think British Columbians think that we should be doing. And certainly that's not the spirit of what we did that day in March, which was approve the money because British Columbians needed that help.
Do you have a follow-up, Binder?
Yeah, just on housing affordability, some of the things include a freeze on rents until the end of 2021, a renter's rebate, and also saying that if strata insurance costs don't come down, that they'd be open to a public option. So I'm just wondering where the Liberals stand on those promises, and if you would support like a rent freeze for the next year or so.
Well, that response and what you see in the platform is all temporary. That's the problem. We have long-term challenges around affordability, and the only way we're going to get around that is supply. A temporary rent freeze, which may help for the moment, isn't going to deal with the longer-term challenges of affordability. And we've got to get back to encouraging the development industry, encouraging city halls, and encouraging development overall, and different types of development in the region, and look at how we can move forward. During the last election in May of 2017, we had over 100,000 housing units going through various stages of approval through the city halls in the Lower Mainland. 100,000. And in some cases, it can take 3 months to approve a housing development. Sometimes it can take 2 years. So every jurisdiction is different. We have to tackle those issues. The NDP's announcement today, I would say, is a temporary solution to these issues. They're not long-term solutions. Even rent freezes may mean that people may not build, and people and landlords may not, over the long term, want to invest in rental property as well. So I'm not saying it doesn't help people. Yes, it does. But the real long-term solutions are not found here at this particular point. These are temporary solutions.
Thank you. Next question will go to Les Lane from the Times Colonist. Go ahead, Les.
Oh, thank you. The $1,000, you're saying that's kind of a bribe, but what's the difference between that and the Liberal, the tax holiday, which is, I think, even more expensive? Everybody's kind of in the same field in terms of giving money away to voters, are they not?
Well, look, I think people are expecting us to be bold. What I meant by the NDP's plan, Les, is that they had that money sitting in March. I just can't believe they held on to it and announced it now, 2 or 3 weeks before an election. In the case of the PST announcement, the relief is immediate, yes. It puts money in the hands of British Columbians, and they spend the money where they want to. And at the end of the day, it gets them spending money in small businesses that desperately need the help. The fact that the NDP held on to those dollars is the issue that I have great concern with. That money was there. That money could have provided some help earlier on. I just can't believe a government would hold on to dollars when British Columbians needed the help in March and April, and hold on to it and announce it in October.
Do you have a follow-up, Les?
I was wondering what you think of the ICBC pitch that your leader unveiled. I'm frankly, I'm not an expert on car insurance, but I'm having trouble comprehending exactly how that isn't a recipe for a lot of costs with two completely different dual systems running at the same time.
Well, you know, Les, I served as an ICBC critic for probably about a year. And I got to tell you, I've never received more emails in my life from British Columbians on regards to cost, in regards to treatment, in regards to choice. And what Mr. Wilkinson announced today is about choice. We want to give British Columbians the opportunity to decide. Do you want to rely on the public system? Do you want to have the opportunity to have various choice? So if you want a private system, that should be available to you. If you want to rely on the public system, that should be available to you. And through it, we hope it pushes for greater innovation and drives down prices as well. I mean, to this day, it's quite shocking that British Columbians cannot book their insurance, or at least buy their insurance online. Yet we can do that with travel and many other things. So this is to drive innovation and to drive choice in the market. And it's one thing we keep hearing from British Columbians. There are those who fundamentally support a private system. There are those who are passionate about a public system. I'm sure we can have both. But at this point, it's really about driving innovation within the public system, and also by doing so, you're going to bring in competition. I think that's very important for the private sector side and for the public sector side. And I think that's what we keep hearing from British Columbia. At its core, it's about choice, and that's what we want to give the people of British Columbia.
Thanks, Les. Next question will go to Ian Bailey from the Globe and Mail. Go ahead, Ian.
Jas, what exactly will the BC Liberals do? What will they announce or say they will do about rental affordability, given that the NDP has obviously come up with proposals that include the rental freeze?
Well, I would say stay tuned. I'm not going to be making that announcement. I'm sure Mr. Wilkinson will address that in the days ahead. It is an issue that is clear and present for all British Columbians, and it's not just a Lower Mainland issue. Housing is a challenge. We have significant amount of growth in the Lower Mainland. We have different sets of rules, 21 different municipalities, sometimes a balkanized governance structure that impacts some of the issues in and around affordability. But the provincial government has a role to play as well. We want to get to a point where we encourage the greater building of rental property for British Columbians. We want to get to a point where there's a different variety of housing built as well, not just single-family housing, but those 2- and 3-bedroom townhouses that so many young families are looking for, particularly in the urban core. So I think you'll hear more on that issue in the days ahead, but it is a challenge. I'm just saying that what the NDP have announced at this particular point are temporary measures. They don't deal with the core issue of longer-term affordability and providing choice in the housing market as well. Because British Columbians, particularly here in Vancouver, you don't want to be doing that hour and a half commute. How do we get more people living in the city? How do people enjoy life here rather than being stuck in a 2-hour commute? So I think we'll have more for you in the days ahead.
Do you have a follow-up, Ian?
Yeah, quick follow-up. When's your platform out?
You want to deal with that?
Sorry, Ian, I didn't hear the question.
When is the BC Liberal platform coming out?
Well, we've been announcing it with the Massey announcement the other day. Of course, the PST announcement that you've heard. We've had announcements in and around seniors' care. So all of that has slowly been released, and more of it is going to be released in the days ahead.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions today. Next one will go to Shannon Waters from BC Today. Go ahead, Shannon.
Hi there. I wanted to go back to the renters stuff. The Greens have come out with their promise. The NDP have come out with their promise. On the NDP side, people are saying, why should renters believe that the rebate will be real this time around? But I also wanted to go back to some comments that your leader has made previously about renters, specifically it being a wacky time of life. And how BC renters should approach your party's promises on the issue, given comments previously made.
Well, look, I think Mr. Wilkinson has addressed that issue. I think it was probably a poor choice of words. What he was trying to say was that he has been a renter. He was a struggling student at one time as well, putting himself through school, and in his early days working at a hospital as well. So, he was referring to his early days. Was it the best choice of words? Probably not, but he's addressed that issue. I think all of us know, whether as parents or those who are starting their careers, the rental market in British Columbia is tough, particularly in Metro Vancouver. So the issue here really is how do we work with the industry and local government to make sure we are building more housing and providing more housing and a variety of housing in the Metro Vancouver area. As I've said before, part of the challenges is that we've got a balkanized governance structure, different approval processes in different municipalities. We have spent many a generation focusing on single-family homes, when that is not the priority moving forward in many cases, where we have multiple types of housing, from townhouses to condominiums and different types of housing that needs to be available. That conversation is ongoing and continuing. I can tell you that you can't vilify the development industry. You have to work with them and local government. And we have certainly encouraged the greater density in communities as well. So, in regards to your specific question, Mr. Wilkinson understands the needs of the rental industry. Look, he's got 3 kids, and we all want our children to be able to afford and live here, and we understand the challenges that are there. He's talked openly about that. So in regards to the rental industry specifically, you'll hear more from us in the days ahead, but the specific question that you asked in regards to Mr. Wilkinson, he's addressed that issue, and that we want, moving forward, to have the city and all urban areas be available to our communities and be able to grow. Like, I hear that in Richmond all the time, parents concerned that their kids can't afford to live in the community. So we have to offer different types of housing. We have to push for greater density, particularly in and around SkyTrain and transit. So that's the broader conversation. But if you think a $1,000 renter rebate is going to solve the problem, it's not. We have to work with the development industry and the municipalities and collectively focus on issues that matter, which means a greater emphasis on building rental, which I think we have gotten away from collectively as a society since the 1990s, early 1990s. That's one. And like I've said, a variety of housing needs have to be addressed. A greater density in regards to townhouse complexes, offering those 2- and 3-bedroom homes that many families are looking for, and bigger condominiums as well. So it's a collective issue that no one government's going to solve. We have to work together on that.
Do you have a follow-up, Shannon?
I do. I'm interested in, you mentioned a couple times balkanization, sort of at the, different levels of government and local levels. Would the Liberals be entertaining potentially, entering into some kind of dialogue with communities about making zoning changes? Or what are you seeing as a possible solution to address that issue?
I've pointed out a glaring problem. And it's a problem that I think any builder would tell you about, that each municipality is different. I think collectively, I think any party would want to sit down with governments and find some unique ways that we can get beyond some of the challenges. Each community has different standards. Each community has built-in costs for a builder to put together a condominium project or a townhouse complex or a single-family home. And we have to get to a point where we standardize some of these broader challenges, standardize some of these building codes, standardize some of these rules, so at least we have an idea, this is what it's going to cost to build, driving down costs, and some sort of standardization. Am I advocating that we're going to do it tomorrow? No. But I think what I've pointed out is a glaring issue that all parties are struggling with, whether it's those that are building, whether it's municipal governments or provincial government. That's where I think a broader dialogue between the 2 levels of government and the industry has to occur. It's a challenge for sure, and it's not changing. So, my assessment of it is that we have more work to do as provincial government, as municipal government, and of course the industry as well. It's a conversation personally as an MLA I hear a lot of in Richmond, and I think that's collectively that we need to be into that dialogue. So how do we standardize some of this cost pressure and building that is required so buildings can be put together in a much shorter period of time, and we're not driving up costs to build these facilities because we need to be building more and a lot faster.
We have time for one more question today. Sure. That'll be Sabrina Wong from Fairchild Radio. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I'd just like to clarify regarding your press release I see earlier. Can you clarify what you mean by give all new drivers credit for 2 years of driving experience increasing to 4 years? So what exactly is increasing to 4 years?
The challenge, one of the challenges that we have for young drivers, when you look at the statistics, there is generally a greater accident rate with younger drivers. And I think we've had graduated driver's licensing brought in many years ago, and that's helped. But we also feel that you shouldn't penalize young drivers as well. This is a rule and regulation that's available in certain provinces, I think in Atlantic Canada specifically, where young drivers aren't dinged for just being young drivers. Many young drivers, most young drivers, are responsible. And what it says is if you get into an accident, your premium will go up. But we don't just naturally assume, just because you're young, that you're not responsible. So that's the difference in regards to that particular regulation that you're talking about. I do believe Nova Scotia has something like that. And at the end of the day, it addresses a very simple issue, which is many young people, most young people, are responsible. And we shouldn't be dinging them just because a certain percentage of them have a tendency to get into accidents. And what you're seeing now with the ICBC rules, you have responsible young people driving a car that may be $4,000, worth $4,000, and then hit with a $5,000 insurance premium. And what you do is you end up going to the bank of mom and dad, or in some cases, the student may use mom and dad's vehicle instead of actually getting insurance themselves. So there have been, in some cases, ways around for parents, and sometimes people, I don't think, are forthright in stating that a student may be driving a vehicle more than they actually are. And that's what's happened now with these $5,000 a year premiums. Many young people are paying, and in many cases, handing over the bill to mom and dad. So what this does is basically says that if you're a young person and you're responsible, you're going to get a buy. But if you get in an accident, you are going to pay more. We just don't assume just because you're a new driver that you're not responsible.
Do you have a follow-up, Sabrina?
Yeah, just to clarify again. So the extra 4 years is if that's driver education for 4 years, your premiums will decrease.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So the 4 years part of it is if you've completed driver education and you get, would you get a decrease in your premium then?
I'd have to get back to you on that specific question. I don't have that information before me, but we can definitely call you. Just give us an hour or so. We'll get back to you on that.
Great, thanks. That's all the time we have for today, everyone. Thank you so much, and we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.